The call came at 3 a.m. on a Tuesday. Dad's hospice nurse, her voice gentle but urgent. "Hannah, your father is asking for you. I think you should come now." I threw on yesterday's clothes and drove through empty streets, my hands shaking on the wheel. Dad had been declining for weeks, the cancer finally winning its 2-year battle. I'd been there every day, holding his hand, reading him the mystery novels he loved, making sure he wasn't alone. When I arrived at the house, my brother Connor's BMW was already in the driveway. Strange, he'd been too busy to visit for the past month, claiming work commitments at his real estate firm. Now suddenly, he'd beaten me there at 3 a.m.? I found them in Dad's study, not the bedroom. Dad was propped up in his wheelchair, barely conscious, while Connor held documents in front of him. A woman I didn't recognize sat at Dad's desk with a notary stamp. "What the hell are you doing?" I burst through the door. Connor didn't even flinch. Dad wanted to make some changes to his estate planning. Last-minute clarity, you know how it is. At 3 a.m, while he can barely open his eyes, Dad's head lolled toward my voice. "Hannah." His voice was paper-thin. "I'm here, Dad." I rushed to his side, noting how his hand trembled as Connor guided it toward a signature line. "Just sign here, Dad," Connor said smoothly. "Remember what we discussed? About how Hannah doesn't need the money since she's just a teacher. How I can better manage the family assets." "He's on morphine." I grabbed the papers. "He doesn't even know what year it is." Connor yanked them back. "He was lucid when we started. Right, Mrs. Patterson?" The notary shifted uncomfortably. He seemed aware when I arrived. I looked at the documents, a new will, dated today, leaving everything to Connor. The house, the investments, Mom's jewelry, even the small education fund Dad had promised to my classroom. All of it to Connor with a single line. "To my daughter Hannah, I leave my love and best wishes, knowing she values sentiment over material wealth." "You wrote this," I accused Connor. "That's not how Dad talks. People get formal when dealing with legal matters." He turned back to Dad. "One more signature, Dad. The power of attorney." That's when I saw it. Dad wasn't just tired. His pupils were pinpoints, his breathing too shallow. I'd spent enough time here to know his normal morphine response. "You increased his dose," I whispered. "You drugged him." That's a serious accusation. But Connor's hand moved to his pocket, where I could see the outline of a medication bottle. "Nurse!" I screamed. "Nurse!" Margaret, Dad's night nurse, came running. She took one look at Dad and went pale. "His medication log says he just had a dose an hour ago. He shouldn't need." She checked his vitals. "We need to call the doctor." Now, in the chaos that followed, the doctor arriving, Dad being stabilized, forms being filled out about the medication error, Connor managed to slip away with his documents. The notary followed, looking deeply uncomfortable. Dad passed away 6 days later. He never fully regained consciousness, but he held my hand until the end. I whispered that I loved him, that the money didn't matter, that being his daughter was worth more than any inheritance. Connor didn't come back to the hospice. He was too busy filing the new will with the probate court. The funeral was a blur. Connor played the grieving son perfectly, even gave a touching eulogy about Dad's business acumen and how he'd promised to carry on the family legacy. He avoided my eyes the entire time. 2 weeks later, we sat in the office of Dad's lawyer, George Hendricks. I'd known George since I was little. He'd handled my parents' divorce, Mom's estate after the car accident, every major legal moment of our lives. Connor sat across from me, designer suit impeccable, already calculating what to do with his windfall. He'd brought his own lawyer, a shark from downtown who specialized in estate law. "Before we begin," George said, adjusting his glasses, "I need to address some irregularities." Connor's lawyer leaned forward. "If you're referring to the timing of the will's execution, my client has affidavits confirming Mr. Morrison was of sound mind." "No," George interrupted. "I'm referring to this." He pulled out a thick folder. "The will Mr. Connor Morrison filed with the court last week." "Yes," Connor said smoothly. "Dad's final wishes." He realized I was better suited to manage the family assets. Interesting. George's poker face was legendary, but I caught a glimmer in his eye. Because according to state law, a will executed under suspicious circumstances, such as increased morphine dosage not prescribed by the attending physician, can be contested. Connor shifted slightly. "There's no proof of any irregularities." "Actually, there is." George pulled out another document. The hospice nurse filed a report. The attending physician confirmed the patient's morphine levels were dangerously high. And most interestingly, he slid a paper across the table. The notary, Mrs. Patterson, has provided a sworn statement that she felt pressured to proceed despite concerns about Mr. Morrison's capacity. Connor's lawyer started to object, but George wasn't finished. However, that's not why we're here today. We're here because of this. He pulled out another document, older, with Dad's shaky but clear signature. A will executed 5 months ago, properly witnessed, during a documented period of lucidity, and filed with this office the same day. Connor went white. That's impossible. Dad never mentioned. Because he knew you'd try something like this. George opened the will. Mr. Morrison came to me after his diagnosis. He was quite clear about his wishes and his concerns. Shall I read the relevant passages? Connor's hands gripped the armrests of his chair. George cleared his throat. To my son Connor, whose ambition has always exceeded his ethics, I leave the sum of $1 and a piece of advice. Money obtained through deception is worth less than money earned through honor. The room was dead silent. The remainder of my estate, including the family home, all investment accounts, and personal belongings, I leave to my daughter Hannah, who has shown me that wealth is measured not in dollars but in presence, not in portfolios but in patience. She spent her evenings reading to a dying man while others calculated their inheritance. Connor's face had gone from white to red. This is fake. Hannah must have. There's more, George continued. I am aware that Connor may attempt to contest this will or manipulate me into changing it as my condition worsens. Therefore, I am also establishing an educational trust with $500,000 to be managed by Hannah, specifically for providing resources to underfunded schools. This trust is irrevocable and protected from any claims by Connor or his descendants. There's a video component as well, George said, turning his computer screen toward us. Would you like to see it? Connor's mouth opened and closed like a fish. On the screen, Dad appeared, thin but alert, sitting in this very office 5 months ago. His voice was clear and firm. If you're watching this, it means Connor tried to change my will when I was too sick to resist. Son, I've known about your debts, your gambling, your lies to investors about having capital from the family trust. I've watched you become someone I don't recognize, someone who would exploit his dying father for money. Hannah, sweetheart, I'm sorry you have to deal with this. The house is yours. Fill it with the laughter of the students you love so much. And Connor, I forgive you. But forgiveness doesn't mean enabling. Get help, son. Before you lose more than money. The video ended. Connor sat frozen, staring at the blank screen. This is interesting, George said, and something in his tone made everyone look up. Because filing a fraudulent will is a felony. Attempting to unduly influence a dying person is elder abuse. And increasing someone's morphine dose without authorization. He let the implications hang. That's when Connor fainted. He just crumpled. One moment he was sitting there, the next he was on the floor, his expensive suit crumpled, his carefully styled hair mussed. His lawyer rushed to help him, calling for water, air, space. While they fussed over him, George quietly slid another folder to me. Your father also left you this. Personal letters, some photos, and information about Connor's debts. He wanted you to understand why he did what he did. Connor came around slowly, his lawyer helping him into a chair. The shark attorney was already calculating, whispering about contesting, about Dad's mental state, about undue influence from me. I wouldn't, George said mildly. We have the video, the medical records showing Mr. Morrison's clarity that day, and 3 witnesses besides myself. Plus, any contest would require explaining the midnight while signing and the morphine incident. The district attorney is already interested in that situation. Connor looked at me then, really looked at me for the first time in years. You turned him against me. No, I said quietly. You did that yourself. Every missed visit, every excuse, every time you called him asking for money but never asking how he was. I didn't poison him against you, Connor. I just showed up. I needed that money. His voice cracked. You don't understand. I owe people. Dangerous people. Then you should have been honest with Dad. He would have helped you. He always helped you. He would have lectured me. Made me grovel. He would have loved you. That's all he ever did. Connor left with his lawyer, threats of litigation trailing behind them. But we all knew it was over. He'd overplayed his hand, literally drugged our father for a signature, and found out that Dad had been 3 steps ahead the whole time. George walked me to my car afterward. Your father was a smart man. He knew Connor would try something when he got desperate enough. That's why he came to me early, set everything up properly. Why didn't he just tell Connor the truth? That he'd already changed the will. Because he hoped Connor would surprise him. Would choose love over money at the end. When Connor didn't visit for that last month, your father knew. But he still hoped. And the video? His idea. He said Connor would need to see it to believe it. And he wanted to tell him he loved him one more time, even if Connor wouldn't hear it until after. I sat in my car for a long time after George left, holding the folder of letters Dad had written. One for every year he thought he might miss. Birthday cards for future grandchildren. And a note for Connor sealed with "When you're ready" written on the front. Connor never contested the will. The threat of criminal charges and the ironclad documentation made it pointless. He declared bankruptcy 6 months later, moved to Florida, started over. We don't talk, but I hear things through cousins. He's working as a property manager, living quietly, maybe finally learning what Dad tried to teach him about earning versus taking. The house is mine now, but it doesn't feel like a victory. It feels like what it is, a father's last attempt to protect one child while hoping to save another. I turned the big formal dining room into a library for my students, filled with the books Dad loved. They come after school for tutoring and homework help, their laughter filling the spaces where Connor and I once played. The Educational Trust has supplied 10 schools with new technology. Every computer has a small plaque, donated by the Morrison Family Trust, wealth measured in wisdom. I kept one thing from that awful night, the pen Connor had tried to make Dad sign with. It sits on my desk at school, a reminder that inheritance isn't about what you're given. It's about what you choose to do when someone you love is at their most vulnerable. Dad knew Connor would come for the money. He knew I'd come to say goodbye. In the end, we both got exactly what we deserved. Connor got his dollar and his conscience, and I got the chance to carry on Dad's real legacy. The belief that showing up matters more than showing off. The will reading made Connor faint because he realized he'd been caught, exposed, and defeated by the father he'd underestimated. But I think he fainted for another reason too. The weight of hearing Dad say, "I forgive you," when what he'd earned was abandonment. Sometimes the greatest inheritance is discovering that someone knew exactly who you were and loved you anyway. And sometimes the worst punishment is getting exactly what you schemed for, only to find it worthless in the face of what you lost earning it.